The young and the restless spoilers, Sally Spectra had endured rejection, betrayal, and humiliation before, but what Victor Newman was doing to her now felt different. It was not merely another battle in Genoa City, nor was it simply the latest attempt by a powerful man to remind her that she did not belong among the city's most influential families. This time, Victor seemed determined to destroy everything Sally had worked so hard to build. Every professional opportunity she pursued suddenly disappeared. Every investor who initially expressed interest in her ideas eventually backed away without explanation. Business meetings were canceled at the last minute, potential partners stopped returning her calls, and even people who once praised her creativity began treating her as if associating with her could damage their own reputations. At first, Sally tried to convince herself that she was being paranoid. Genoa City was filled with ruthless competition, and failure was always possible. However, the pattern soon became impossible to ignore. Victor's influence was everywhere, even when his name was never spoken. He did not need to enter a room or issue a public threat. A quiet telephone call, a carefully delivered warning, or the suggestion that Newman Enterprises might reconsider a business relationship was enough to make people abandon Sally without asking questions. She felt trapped inside an invisible cage, and every time she tried to force her way out, Victor seemed to tighten the walls around her. The pressure began to affect Sally in ways she could no longer hide. She was exhausted from pretending she was strong when she felt as though she were collapsing inside. She spent sleepless nights going over contracts, messages, and canceled appointments, searching for some mistake that could explain why her plans kept falling apart. She questioned her instincts, her talent, and even her right to remain in Genoa City. There were moments when she wondered whether Victor had finally succeeded in doing what so many others had failed to accomplish, making her believe that she would always be an outsider, no matter how hard she worked. Yet, beneath the sadness and frustration, another feeling was growing. Sally was becoming suspicious. Victor had never liked her, and he had never hidden his belief that she brought trouble into the lives of the people around him. Still, his current campaign against her seemed strangely methodical. It lacked the personal anger she had seen from him in the past. Victor was not confronting her directly or delivering one of his famous warnings. Instead, he was operating from the shadows, as though he were carrying out an agreement rather than pursuing his own vendetta. Sally began to wonder whether Victor was truly the architect of her downfall or merely the weapon someone else had chosen to use. That possibility changed everything. Sally knew Victor was not a man who accepted orders easily. He was accustomed to controlling others, not being controlled. Anyone who persuaded him to interfere so aggressively in her life would need to offer something valuable in return. It could not have been a simple favor, and it certainly could not have been based only on hatred. Victor did not waste his power without expecting a benefit. Once Sally understood that, she stopped looking only at what he was doing and began asking who might profit from it. The list of people who disliked her was not short, but few possessed the influence or resources to negotiate with Victor Newman. Fewer still would dare approach him with a proposal involving her removal from Genoa City. Sally considered several possibilities, but one name kept returning to her thoughts even though she initially rejected it. Jill Abbott. Jill had never trusted Sally, especially where Billy was concerned. She viewed Sally as unpredictable, ambitious, and capable of drawing Billy deeper into chaos. Sally knew Jill believed that Billy's worst impulses were often encouraged by the women closest to him, and despite every effort Sally made to prove her loyalty, Jill refused to see her as anything other than another dangerous complication in her son's life. The hostility between Sally and Jill had never been subtle. Jill did not need to shout to make Sally feel unwelcome. A cold glance, a sarcastic remark, or a carefully worded insult was usually enough. Jill had a talent for making Sally feel as though she were being examined and found lacking in every possible way. Sally, however, was not someone who quietly accepted humiliation. She pushed back, defended herself, and refused to allow Jill to dictate whom Billy could love or trust. Their confrontations became increasingly bitter because neither woman was willing to surrender. Jill believed Sally was manipulating Billy and distracting him from his responsibilities. Sally believed Jill wanted complete control over Billy's choices and could not tolerate any woman who encouraged him to think independently. Their conflict was not simply based on dislike. It was a struggle over Billy's future, his loyalty, and the question of whether he would continue living according to his mother's expectations or build a life on his own terms. Neither Sally nor Jill had been able to eliminate the other from Billy's world, and the longer the tension continued, the more desperate Jill appeared to become. Sally's suspicions might have remained nothing more than a theory if she had not seen Victor one night under circumstances that immediately made her uneasy. It was late, and a cold darkness had settled over Genoa City. Sally had spent another miserable evening trying to rescue a business arrangement that had suddenly collapsed without a reasonable explanation. The potential partner had been enthusiastic only 24 hours earlier, but after receiving a mysterious telephone call, he claimed the project had become too risky. Sally recognized Victor's fingerprints immediately. Angry and unable to return home, she walked through the city, hoping the night air might clear her head. As she passed a small cafe that remained open long after most nearby businesses had closed, she noticed Victor sitting at a table near the back. His presence alone would not have surprised her, but the woman seated across from him did. Sally stopped in the shadows outside the window and stared in disbelief. It was Jill Abbott. At first, Sally could not hear what they were saying, but their body language told her the meeting was anything but friendly. Jill leaned forward, her expression tense and demanding. Victor sat back with the calm confidence of a man who believed he had complete control of the situation. Then Jill raised her voice, and even through the cafe window, Sally could hear the anger in her tone. Victor answered sharply, and the argument escalated. Sally's heart began beating faster as she realized she might finally have found the missing connection. She moved closer to the entrance and slipped inside without drawing attention to herself. A narrow wall separated the main seating area from a small hallway near the restrooms, giving her a place to remain hidden while still hearing the conversation. Sally knew she was taking a risk. If Victor or Jill discovered her, they would immediately understand that she had been following the trail of sabotage. Nevertheless, she could not walk away. Too much had been taken from her, and this might be her only opportunity to learn the truth. Jill's voice carried through the nearly empty cafe. She accused Victor of moving too slowly and complained that Sally was still in Genoa City despite everything he had done. Victor responded that Jill had underestimated Sally's stubbornness. He reminded her that Sally had survived public scandals, business failures, romantic betrayals, and attacks from people far more powerful than she was. Destroying a few opportunities would not necessarily force her to leave. Jill insisted that Victor needed to increase the pressure. She wanted Sally isolated, professionally ruined, and emotionally exhausted. According to Jill, Sally would eventually realize that Genoa City offered her nothing except pain and humiliation. Once she believed there was no future left for her, she would leave voluntarily, and Billy would finally be free of her influence. Hearing those words made Sally feel physically ill. Every canceled meeting, every rejected proposal, and every whispered insult suddenly formed one clear picture. Jill had not merely complained about her to Victor. She had asked him to dismantle her life piece by piece. Victor, however, was not behaving like Jill's obedient partner. He warned her that their agreement had limits. He had used his influence to close doors, discourage investors, and make Sally question whether she could survive in Genoa City, but he refused to take reckless actions that could be traced directly back to Newman Enterprises. Jill argued that Victor had promised to handle the problem. Victor corrected her immediately, saying that he had promised to apply pressure, not to create a scandal that could damage his family or his company. Their disagreement revealed something Sally had not expected. Victor was not acting out of personal hatred alone. He had entered into a bargain with Jill. In return for helping remove Sally from Billy's life, Jill had apparently offered Victor something he wanted: her support in defeating one of his business rivals. Jill assured him that when the time came, she would provide access, information, and influence that could weaken whichever opponent Victor chose to target. She claimed she could open doors even Victor could not easily reach, and she was willing to do so as long as Sally was driven out of town. The arrangement was shocking, but it was also completely logical. Victor valued leverage, and Jill possessed decades of business experience, connections, and knowledge about powerful people in Genoa City. She understood companies, family vulnerabilities, and hidden rivalries. If she chose to cooperate with Victor, she could become a dangerous ally. Jill was effectively trading her influence for Sally's destruction. To Jill, the bargain may have seemed justified because she believed she was protecting Billy. To Victor, it was simply another transaction. Sally's life, career, and emotional well-being were being treated as pieces on a chessboard. Neither Victor nor Jill appeared concerned about how much damage they caused, as long as they achieved their goals. Sally pressed herself against the wall, struggling to remain silent. Anger burned through her exhaustion. For weeks, she had blamed herself for every failure. She had questioned whether she was talented enough, disciplined enough, or strong enough to build a future. Now she understood that she had not been failing at all. Two of Genoa City's most powerful figures had been quietly removing every chance she had to succeed. The realization was painful, but it also gave her strength. Victor and Jill had wanted her to feel helpless. Instead, they had accidentally given her something she desperately needed, a clear enemy and a reason to fight back. Sally's despair began turning into fury. She wanted to step out of the hallway, confront them, and tell them that their plan had failed. She imagined the shock on Jill's face and the cold anger in Victor's eyes. Yet she forced herself to remain hidden. An emotional confrontation might feel satisfying, but it would also warn them that she knew everything. Sally understood that information was only powerful when the enemy did not know she possessed it. The conversation became even more revealing as Jill admitted that she had already tried to convince Billy that Sally was damaging his future. Billy refused to listen, and every attempt to criticize Sally only made him more determined to defend her. Jill believed that as long as Sally remained in Genoa City, Billy would continue making decisions she considered reckless. She blamed Sally for encouraging his defiance and feeding his desire to challenge powerful men like Victor. Jill insisted that removing Sally was the only way to make Billy focus on his family, his responsibilities, and the future she had imagined for him. Victor mocked Jill's confidence, asking whether she truly believed Billy would become obedient simply because Sally disappeared. Jill's anger intensified. She accused Victor of enjoying the situation too much and warned him not to underestimate what she was willing to do. Victor calmly reminded her that desperation often caused people to make mistakes. He advised her to control her emotions before Billy discovered how far she had gone. Those words gave Sally another advantage. Victor did not completely trust Jill, and Jill did not completely trust Victor. Their alliance was built on mutual benefit rather than loyalty. Sally knew such alliances could be broken if the right pressure was applied. She began considering how she might use their distrust against them. She could approach Victor privately and convince him that Jill planned to betray him once Sally was gone. She could expose enough of the arrangement to Billy that he would confront Jill, forcing her to defend actions she could never fully justify. She might even allow Jill to believe Victor had revealed the secret himself. A carefully planted lie could turn the two conspirators against each other before they realized Sally was responsible. For the first time in weeks, Sally felt her instincts returning. She was no longer a wounded target reacting to attacks she did not understand. She was Sally Spectra, a survivor who had rebuilt her life more than once and who knew how to fight when powerful people tried to erase her. Still, the greatest challenge would be Billy. Sally knew that revealing Jill's betrayal could devastate him. Whatever problems existed between Billy and his mother, he loved her, and some part of him continued hoping for her approval. Learning that Jill had secretly allied herself with Victor to destroy Sally would place Billy in an impossible position. He would be forced to choose between defending Sally and protecting his relationship with his mother. Jill might claim that everything she had done was motivated by love and concern. She would portray Sally as the threat and herself as a mother willing to make difficult choices to save her son. Victor would likely distance himself from the entire plan, presenting the sabotage as a business decision or insisting that Jill had exaggerated their agreement. Without proof, Sally could easily be painted as paranoid, vindictive, or desperate to separate Billy from his family. She needed more than what she had overheard. She needed evidence strong enough that neither Jill nor Victor could deny it. Sally carefully reached for her phone, wondering whether she could record the rest of the conversation without being discovered. She turned off the sound and began capturing their voices. The recording was imperfect because of the distance and the noise from the cafe, but several crucial statements were clear. Jill could be heard demanding that Victor finish what he had started. Victor mentioned the business support Jill had promised him. Most importantly, Jill clearly stated that Sally had to be driven out of Genoa City before she destroyed Billy's future. Sally knew those words could change everything. She continued recording until Victor abruptly stood from the table. For one terrifying moment, Sally feared he had sensed her presence. Victor looked toward the hallway, his eyes narrowing as though some instinct had warned him they were not alone. Sally held her breath and remained perfectly still. Jill told him to sit down, but Victor ignored her. He slowly walked toward the hallway while Sally searched for another way out. A service door stood only a few feet behind her. Sally opened it quietly and slipped into the narrow alley beside the cafe just before Victor reached the hallway. She hurried away through the darkness, gripping her phone as though it were the only weapon she possessed. She did not stop until she was several streets away. Only then did she look at the recording and confirm that it had been saved. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear alone. The pain and helplessness that had consumed her were being replaced by determination. Victor and Jill believed they had pushed Sally to the edge. They assumed she was too tired to fight and too isolated to expose them. They had mistaken her silence for defeat. Sally returned home that night, knowing her life had changed. She was still hurt by the cruelty of the scheme, and she could not forget that Jill's hatred had become strong enough to turn her into Victor's secret ally. However, Sally also understood that revealing the truth too quickly could destroy her advantage. She needed to think like her enemies. Victor valued control, Jill valued Billy's future, and both feared public humiliation. Sally could threaten all three at once if she acted carefully. She could rebuild the opportunities Victor had destroyed by proving that the sabotage was deliberate. She could force Jill to admit that her actions were driven not by concern but by her refusal to accept Sally. She could make Billy see that the people claiming to protect him were actually manipulating his life behind his back. The following morning, Sally appeared calmer than she had in weeks. No one looking at her would have guessed that she had uncovered a conspiracy or spent the night planning her next move. She answered messages, reviewed her remaining business contacts, and began identifying which losses could be traced to Victor's influence. She also made a copy of the recording and stored it somewhere neither Victor nor Jill could reach. Sally knew Victor was dangerous when cornered, and Jill could be just as ruthless when protecting Billy. She would not underestimate either of them. Her retaliation had to be patient, precise, and impossible to reverse. For now, Sally would allow Victor and Jill to believe their plan was working. She would appear exhausted. She would let rumors spread that she was considering leaving Genoa City. She might even allow Jill to hear that Billy and Sally's relationship was under growing pressure. The more confident Jill became, the more likely she was to reveal additional details or demand more extreme action from Victor. Meanwhile, Sally would quietly collect evidence, rebuild her alliances, and prepare the moment when the entire scheme would be exposed. When that moment arrived, Jill would have to face Billy and explain why she had chosen Victor Newman as her secret partner. Victor would have to explain why he had used his power to destroy a woman's career in exchange for Jill's assistance against a future enemy. Billy would be forced to confront the painful truth that his mother had manipulated his life while claiming to protect him. What Victor and Jill did not yet understand was that they had awakened the most dangerous version of Sally Spectra. She was no longer fighting merely to save a business opportunity or prove that she belonged in Genoa City. She was fighting for her dignity, her future, and her right to make her own choices without powerful people deciding where she was permitted to live or whom she was allowed to love. Sally had overheard every secret, every threat, and every detail of their bargain. Her anger was no longer uncontrolled. It had become focused. Jill wanted Sally gone. Victor wanted Jill's cooperation. Both believed Sally was the weakest person in their arrangement. They were about to discover how badly they had miscalculated. Sally would not leave Genoa City in defeat. She would remain exactly where she was, watching and waiting until Victor and Jill turned against each other. Then, when they least expected it, she would reveal the recording and force them to answer for every opportunity they had stolen from her. The only question was whether Sally would tell Billy the truth immediately or whether she would first use Victor and Jill's secret alliance to destroy them from within.